trying to follow on from Kieran is difficult if I took the same tack, but he did look at the global picture and then brought it down to what is to be done. And I'd like to do it slightly differently and look at the local picture, what's actually happening in the community and in the country around us at the moment. And I'm going to start with looking at, I suppose this is sort of a personalised view, but it's one I've learned loads from, and that is from being a councillor and sitting on a so-called democratically elected body like Dublin City Council, where last night I spent 4.5, nearly 5 hours sitting listening to the greatest load of horse crap that one can listen to for 4.5, 5 hours. But it did start with a very interesting challenge and how we're going to meet that challenge. One of the few powers that local elected councillors still maintain is to write up a development plan for the city. You wouldn't believe how much local authority power has been taken from people you elect on water, on transport, on housing, on waste management. Ultimately all of those decisions become executive powers. The management decide what's going to happen. So we take a vote 3 times to stop the privatisation of the bin service in Dublin, and the management pulls executive power and privatises it anyway, even though the vote was overwhelmingly against privatising. We voted overwhelmingly on the issue Kieran raised about the incinerator. I don't know, before I became a councillor they were voting on it, and since I've become a councillor I think we've taken at least 3 votes on it. But the manager proceeds anyway because he has executive power over waste management. Not only that, but he refuses to reveal the contents of the contract that he's drawn up with Covanta, even if some of that contents has huge implications for you and me and the services that are provided by the city, because there's penalty clauses. If we don't provide enough rubbish, we have to pay out millions every year to the incinerator provider. I won't bore you with the details, but last night we were being asked to decide on whether we wanted to challenge a group of nuns on the north side of the city who have taken the development plan that we signed off on last year to the High Court on the basis that they can't sell religious lands for the development of flats and apartments and residential housing. People before profit councils, myself and Joan Collins at the time, inserted that clause into the development plan because we were coming through the Celtic Tiger. There was a proliferation of houses and apartments all over the city. The only green spaces left, many of which have hurley fields and football pitches and netball courts and all the rest of it, are the institutional religious lands that also contain the places our kids play sport, that also have nice green fields that you can take your dog for a walk or whatever. And we put in a clause that said these lands will not be used for selling for any more residential use. And there's a map provided by the council. If you look at them, there's loads of blue dots around the city. They're smallish blue dots, but they're blue dots that represent green space for the community. So the nuns, with all their money, take this to the High Court, challenge us, and for the first time in history, the High Court is saying, we are now telling the councillors that they can't do this. And it is the only single power that we have left, to absolutely write off on a development plan. And the Labour Party put a motion that said we should appeal it. We backed that. A few independents backed it. Fine Gael put a motion that said no, we should give up. We should let the nuns have their way. Just give in to it. And they were backed by Fianna Fáil and a few independents, and we lost. But the debate was very, very interesting because it tells you what's going on in society. And Kieran quite rightly characterised Fine Gael as a boss's party, and Fianna Fáil, in this instance, not far behind, but it used to be the reverse way around. And so not only are the interests of the people being eroded, but the powers of those whom you've elected to protect those interests, if you follow what I mean, are constantly being eroded. And the question that comes up all the time when we try to oppose cuts to services, and you can list them off, the amount of creches that are being closed in local communities, the level of disappointment that there is in local communities because the parks aren't being developed. They're stopping projects like all-weather pitches, all this sort of stuff. And every time you oppose that, they say there's no money. And when you say, like Kieran mentioned, tax the rich, they think you're crazy. You can't tax the rich. Are you mad? That's just impossible. It's like saying, pigs can fly, to tax the rich. It is just considered an absolutely outrageous suggestion in this society, when in fact it is simply sensible and it is simply logical. And it is one that we have to keep fighting for and emphasising, because that is what is going to protect our services. And that's why It's really interesting tonight, and I'm really glad to see lots of the activists from the household tax campaign here, the ones that came down to Galway with us on the bus that were out at the Fine Gael conference, that have been building the campaign root and branch in their areas, because for the first time, I would say really since probably the tax marches and after that the H-Block movement, we are seeing a big grassroots movement in this country, and it's been so interesting to see how it developed. I spoke at meetings in Wexford of 600 people, in Waterford of 500, in Tralee of 250, in Limerick of 300. Meetings that the people in those towns and cities were saying, my God, we've never seen anything like this. But what's even more fascinating and interesting is that those meetings didn't just confine themselves to discussing the question of €100 household tax. People were talking about the issues I've just mentioned, about the cuts, the unemployment, the immigration, the bank bailout, and the need for a big change and revolution in this country. And I think that that campaign has encapsulated where the Irish working class psyche is at the moment. Despite the defeat in the referendum, we do have evidence that the Irish working class is beginning to move in a radicalised direction, is willing to challenge the Labour Party, is willing to challenge Fine Gael, is willing to challenge the local authorities, and not just the refusal to pay the mass boycott is tremendous, but the mass demonstrations have also been tremendous. And this week again, you have seen people all over the country coming out against Phil Hogan when he's gone to towns like New Ross and Carlow and all to open conferences. People are coming out opposing him and marching against him again. And just so you all know the good news, at a very large and democratic and positive conference we had a while ago, we agreed that we would plan a major demonstration against the government before they go to sleep for the summer. We're going to sleep on the 19th of July, and on the 18th of July we are organising a demonstration of mass civil disobedience from the central bank to the Dáil. And when I say mass civil disobedience, I mean we're not just going to march and leave it at that. We may well occupy Kildare Street, sit down on the roads, whatever. But the key thing about this demonstration is that we don't want it to be just about the household tax. We want you guys to come out to fight against the cuts to the home help. We want the people, the single parents who've been fighting against the cuts to their allowances to come out. We want all the hospital campaigns to come out. We want to bring together in one big fist all the campaigns that are fighting very, very hard to hold on to the bits and pieces that they have in their community, and begin to, if you like, develop a movement that cuts across all of the, so that people just aren't boxed off into their own self-interest, but they're brought together with all the other campaigns to challenge the government. And it's interesting, Kieran talked a lot about Fine Gael and their role and their history, but I think what's going to be amazing is how the Labour Party are going to respond to all this. Because to be honest, probably an awful lot of people in this room voted Labour, even if they gave them a second or third. People in working class areas vote Labour. There was a huge swing to Labour in the last election, based on promises like, we are going to burn the senior bondholders, they're not going to get their money. And they haven't done that. Not only that, I'm reading a press release from yesterday where it's now going to be on the 26th and the 28th of June, another 1.2 billion is going to pay off 2 senior unsecured bondholders in the former Anglo-Irish Bank. Right? That's your money that was going to be used for, the home helps or the hospitals or whatever. Literally 1.2 billion being taken out of your resources to pay off 2 unnamed faceless senior bondholders again within the next 2 weeks. And I think we should use that as a focus to mobilise people as well. We can talk about that in the discussion part of the meeting. But I do want to reiterate the stuff Kieran said about the root and branch organisation of how we fight back. It's absolutely crucial. I know the women at the back of the room, and you can speak for yourselves in the discussion, are facing massive cuts. They don't even know what the description of those cuts exactly is, because the trade union movement are so treacherous they don't tell them. But they're facing cuts to their hours and their jobs and the services to the elderly and the sick that they provide in the home health services in the community. I know people in factories throughout the country who are facing redundancies and cuts, and the union are negotiating those redundancies. You know this to be true, Paul. And they don't even tell the workers what the threats are that they're facing. The 3 transport companies that were the jewel in the crown at this stage, at one stage, the Irish Rail, Bus Éireann and Dublin Bus, are facing massive attacks. You're talking about hundreds of job losses, cuts to overtime, being forced to work longer weeks, and of course cuts to the community services in terms of transport. That is the ultimate goal, and Fine Gael are probably wetting themselves with joy because they have always made it part of their demands that public transport be thrown open to the private market, and this is their opportunity. But they're going for them all together, not even picking them off one by one. They're going for all three companies together. And this is why the trade union movement is important, because if you take a job like CIE, traditionally highly union orientated and union organised, if the trade union leaders who exist at the moment and the strategy they have at the moment, because they're all went to the Labour Party, are allowed to push through their agenda, there will be no resistance. There'll be no resistance for you guys, there'll be no resistance for the bus workers. And that's why we need to start building a root and branch relating to workers, where they work, getting more people around them, and beginning to organise in a serious way to challenge the bosses and to challenge what the unions are trying to do.